Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can find and subscribe to this podcast via Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our site, vmspod.com, to find more information, as well as our RSS feed, which you can plug into any podcatcher so you never miss an episode of the Virtual Memories Show. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube, where I go by vmspod, and subscribe to my semi-weekly newsletter at buttondown.com/vmspod. Well, I know I said I was going to skip a week from the show because I didn't have something scheduled, but I figure this whole rant, monologue, whatever, is going to would make its way into next week's intro. And that episode's going to be long enough as it is and deserves to be dived right into. So here's another monologue. Sorry to hit you with two of these in a month, but again, you can just wait for the next show. So I took my dad to get cataract surgery on Wednesday. It has been a long-ass process getting to this point. I won't recount the details exactly, except that when we arrived at the surgery building, I recalled coming here like 4 or 5 years ago for him, because I remembered this FDA conference call that I was on in the parking lot behind the building. Almost all of those FDA folks got fired or retired in the past few weeks, which has created some of the work stress that has led me to fall behind a little bit on the show. So once we got in, I looked at my calendar to figure out, when I'd been there, and it turned out it was August 2021. The entry read, Dad, cataract consultation. So yes, this has been going on a while, but since COVID, he's been pretty reluctant to go out in the world. I mean, he was like that for years before, but now he has an excuse. Anyway, we had to get him up pretty early for this appointment. I had to leave the house at 9, pick him up at 9:30. But by his 88-year-old standards, this was early. He was not in great shape for this, really kind of physically shaky, didn't talk much during the drive, except for asking whether they were going to put him under for the cataract procedure. I told him they don't do that. They just give you something to relax, and then they do a local around the eye to make that part easier, which seemed to help. He gets worried about dying on the table, I guess, about going under. But anyway, his wife accompanied us separately, and they told us they have a one companion rule for the waiting room. So I hung out in the building's lobby, dealt with a lot of that work craziness, wrote my newsletter about how there wasn't going to be a podcast this week because of that work craziness and my poor planning and all the other stuff I beat myself up over. It wound up being almost 2 hours in the waiting room until they got him in, but procedure went fine. It only takes like 10 or 15 minutes for the actual procedure. They called me when he was in the recovery room, so I joined his wife in the waiting room and greeted Dad when he came out. And they opened the door, and he was slumped in his wheelchair, bundled in his winter coat, head down, and sort of oblivious to things. I said, that's not fair. What I mean is, he was just really on the interior, inside himself, or quiet. But the combo of the physical stress and the meds for surgery and his overall physical and cognitive decline meant that I just looked at this white-haired old man with his head down and his eye covered in gauze, all bandaged up. And I thought of the words of witless Odin, because yes, I am a monster, but I didn't get this way by accident. I mean, Philip Larkin's quote aside, or taken as a baseline, I think about the more mundane legacies that our parents give us. My eyes aren't great, so maybe cataract surgery isn't too far in my future. I get these moments in my left eye where I start to think, geez, I'm going to have to go through this. When I took Dad to the shoulder specialist a few weeks ago, he was diagnosed with end-stage arthritis, which does not sound great. But I also asked the doc, as a son with a shoulder that makes this sound, should I be worried? And he told me I need to make an appointment and get an x-ray, but he made that face. My brother, meanwhile, needed a hip replacement in his 50s, something my mom had undergone a while back. I do like to think that I've sort of blazed my own trail by getting leukemia, which is not something in my immediate family. Apparently my grandmother had it, but still, I think that's sort of my Gil strikes off on his own. But anyway, we got Dad out of the building and into my car, and I gave him the light blocking sunglasses they gave us before the appointment. They're kind of partitioned. They have these little windows that block everything off, and we made the half-hour drive back to his house. And Dad made a little small talk as we set out. He was confused about where we were. But again, he was tired, stressed. One eye was covered. His other eye isn't great anyway. And throughout all this, I tried to keep a kind tone in my voice. In the past, in some of these things, I would just be I'd be snippy and sharp. And that's not me now. And it's not what he needs. And so, I just tried to be kind and encouraging, and I let him know we were taking a weird route back to Route 208, but I pointed out a couple of landmarks that he might know. And once we got to it, he knew exactly when we were about to pass one of his favorite burger joints from the pre-COVID era. So that was something. But about 10 minutes into the drive, my phone rang, and I took the call over the CarPlay speaker system. It was a pal of mine who I met through work many years ago, but I've become good friends with. In fact, actually, you may remember him if you were a very long time listener, because he was the second or third, depending on how you measure it, guest of all time on the show. John Bertagnoli. I called him John B back then, but John Bertagnoli. I had John on the show about a year after he died, and we had this brief conversation during a trade show. I was still figuring out the shape of the podcast. He only did like 10 or 15 minutes. But yes, I said that he died. John died a year before we talked. He dropped dead from AFib during a soccer match with his friends and got resuscitated by EMTs. Got a box embedded in his chest to zap him if this happens again. It has not, as far as I know. But that time there was no warning, no set of symptoms he was ignoring, just running 1 minute and face down on the turf the next. Dead. So we talked about that in 2012, how it changed his life, what it meant to have a second chance, I guess. And we keep talking about sitting down again for a new episode, but career stuff has gone on. We don't get together during trade shows much. But I'm hoping we get to sit down and see how another 13 years or so of a new life has been lived. But he called on Wednesday. That's what I'm saying here. See, John had gotten the podcast newsletter that I'd sent out like an hour before, and he'd gotten the email I sent my clients around 8 a.m. that morning, discussing potential tariffs in the pharmaceutical sector, which the president had made comments about the night before. And I knew I was going to be gone all day for the cataract appointment, so I wanted to make sure I got a statement out to my members, clients, whatever you want to call them. But John could tell from the tone of both of those emails that I was stressed, burned out, whatever. And he called to find out how I'm doing. And I told him the present circumstances. Post-cataract operation dad sitting next to me, 20 minutes from his house, blah, blah, blah. He said, we can call later. I said, no, we'll talk now. And we did. We spent the whole 20 minutes gabbing. I filled him in on some of the work side stuff, but I also talked about my general state of being and the winter stresses on my mental health and the mistakes I made leading into 2025 that compounded some of those problems. I think I've talked about it before, but I got the first 5 episodes of this year recorded in 2024, which meant that I did not have any recording sessions for the first month or so of 2025, which was not mentally smart or good for me. So I talked about that and also the physical breakdowns that have me feeling really old just now. And then the government policies that I'm dealing with and the way that sort of like his death and resuscitation, my leukemia situation for the last almost 4 years has given me a different framework for approaching things. He thought it was good that I was giving myself a week off from the podcast, but I'm sure he'll enjoy listening to this one. But he appreciates that I was able to just say, can't do it, got too much going on, got to step back, something has to take a back seat. But because this whole thing was on the car speaker, I always speak a little louder when I'm doing those things because I don't know what the other person can hear. And because Dad was next to me, I found myself speaking a little more clearly and slowly than I usually would. And I couldn't tell if he registered a word that I said to John or if he was deliberately ignoring it because he thought it was private or something. His hearing's not phenomenal either. I mean, 88 years old. We wear down. But we ended the call when we got to the house. I got Dad out of the car at home, handed him off to his wife, told him I'd be by the next afternoon to take Dad to his follow-up at the office, which is much closer than the surgery. And before hanging up, I told John, I love you, man. But because we are men of a certain age, he let that slide and didn't say anything. I drove home, and it occurred to me that even when Dad had his faculties, he and I never had a conversation like the one I just had with John, and never would have. Not just, because of the work side stuff, whatever, but, well, calling to see how I'm doing and really listening for something other than fine or okay is just not something that ever really happened between us. Maybe it's part of why I do this and why I talk about myself during the interviews, why the intros go on interminably, because I hope someone's listening. I'll say I don't think Dad ever heard me speak so engagedly and fully with somebody as I did during that drive. And like I say, I don't know if he even heard it, which is sad. I talked a few monologues ago about how I have lately learned to embrace that part of me that gets sad over this stuff, because I spent decades denying all that sadness. And another past guest kind of helped me reframe things and start to integrate that inner child that is very sad about all this stuff. But anyway, I don't just want to recapitulate that stuff. I want to tell you that I was actually really happy that John did reach out, that someone paid attention to what I said and what I didn't say, and what I wrote and what I didn't write, and cared enough not just to text or send an email or something, but call. Just picked up the phone and said, let me see how Gil's doing. It means a lot to me. So a day later, I picked Dad up for the follow-up. Went fine. I mean, the pupil's still dilated. There's a lot of inflammation around the eye, so that meant there wasn't going to be a lot of progress in one day, but nothing bad was happening. And I was sitting directly across from him in the exam room, like directly, and the lights were kind of dim, and his head was down, and he was in this perfectly symmetrical pose of his fingers interlaced in his lap. And I just took out my phone and got this amazing picture of him where he looks kind of like Samuel Beckett getting an eye exam, which is better than witless Odin, I contend. So, much like today, I'm trying to make art out of, the decline of my father. Anyway, after the appointment, it was early evening, like 5:30 or so. He shuffled in his rollator back to the car. And I just kind of figured he could use a treat of some kind after going through all this stress. So I got him some Chick-fil-A, which is his sort of favorite thing in that neighborhood we were in. I still have to make a donation to some LGBTQ fund, which is my indulgence / offset for going to Chick-fil-A, and I'll take care of that this weekend. But I got him some Chick-fil-A, drove him back to his house, had those sunblocker glasses on again, and the rain came down. And he made a little small talk again. Talked about the Knicks, talked about some other stuff. And during this quiet period while we were rolling up Route 17, his head was down and he just was clutching the fast food bag to his chest. I reached over and I just sort of patted him on the knee. I said, "You're going to be okay, Dad." I don't think I ever made that sort of gesture with him, even before any of the surgeries he's had in the past 20 years. I don't know what moved me in that moment. I mean, there was a sad old man sitting next to me who was my father. He didn't say a word. I don't know if he heard me that time either. Thanks for listening, friends. Thanks for listening to the Virtual Memories Show. You can support this podcast by telling other people about it. There's no better way to build an audience than through word of mouth. Also, visit Apple's podcast page for us and leave a rating and review. Every little bit helps, you know? You can also support the show by telling me what you like and don't like about it and who you'd like to hear me record with, or what movie or TV show or book or piece of music or comic or theater or art exhibition or whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by sending me a postcard, letter, email, DM if we're connected on Instagram or Blue Sky, or by leaving a message on my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. Messages can be up to 3 minutes long. It'll cut you off after that, so call back and leave another message if you do. And let me know if it'd be okay to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. You might have something interesting to share with our listeners, but I'd never run someone's message without their permission, so let me know. Now, if you've got money to spare, I appreciate it, but don't give it to me. I've got a day job that pays the bills. You should give to individuals and institutions in need. You can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Crowdfunder, Indiegogo, all those crowdfunding platforms, where you'll find people who really need help just trying to make ends meet or get an artistic project going, covering medical bills or car payments or veterinary bills, and just a few dollars from you might make a real difference in their lives. Now, when it comes to institutions, I give to my local food bank and World Central Kitchen every month, but there are a lot of other things you can give to. The Poor People's Campaign, Freedom Funds, Election Funds, Planned Parenthood, and Women's Choice. There's a lot of things you can do with your money to try to help build a better world, so I hope you'll give. Now, our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You can visit my archives at vmspod.com to check out my 2018 conversation with Hal, where you can learn more about his art, his music, and more. And you can follow Hal on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. That's MAY, 4TH. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download all our past episodes at Apple Podcasts and other podcast sources. And you can find all my episodes and sign up for the Virtual Memories Show newsletter at vmspod.com. And I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram and YouTube as vmspod. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.